In a previous instalment, we mentioned the two vectors of freedom: freedom from, freedom to, freedom from coercion, and the freedom to follow the moral law. Well, in a society, rights and duties are related to these two vectors. Freedom from is about our rights, and freedom to pursue the truth, pursue the moral law, is about our duties. And in a civilised society, I submit, and again, I'm not here to just feed you the line, I'm here to make you think, to get you to reflect, ask yourself. In a civilised society, do not rights and duties have to be related to each other? Can civilization function, let alone flourish, if we don't see the interdependence of rights and duties? Is not the descent into chaos and barbarism the result of this severance of rights from duties? If you have the right to life, if you have the right to live, doesn't that mean I have the duty not to kill you? If you have the right to own something, does that not involve a concomitant duty or obligation on me not to steal it off you? If you have the right to choose a partner, to form a union, does that not place upon me the duty to respect the union? Not to draw somebody off into infidelity? Now, if rights and duties aren't seen as interdependent, then there's no limit to the right, and what we call freedom can become license. And I don't think, quite frank, I think that those who style themselves libertarians have to really question whether at some places are they defending liberty or are they defending license? Is everything freedom that we attach the name freedom to? If I have a right to speak, don't you have a duty to, maybe not to listen if you don't want to, but not to shut me up forcibly without very good reason, informed by the moral law? If I have a right to my body and to decide what goes in it or not, don't you have a duty not to force me to ingest or take some substance into it against my will? Unless you have compelling reason, not bogus reason, but informed by the moral law. Rights and duties have to work together. And rights, as I say, relate to that vector of freedom from coercion. Now, in every community or group of individuals, there is usually a minority and a majority. And the rights are there to protect minority against the tyranny of the majority. Certain political philosophers have talked a fair bit about that. And of course, it's inspired systems of government. the Bill of Rights in the United States, tacked onto their constitution, is inspired by that principle that sometimes there might be government overreach, and we need to protect freedoms from a bigger power, a bigger corporate body tyrannising over the individual. Which brings me to the point, who is the minority? Now, the smallest minority, I suppose, is the minority of one, the individual person who has dignity. We can't go into detail as to who is a person, maybe at another time, because we must be mindful of the dignity and the personhood of the vulnerable. Some people don't think a human embryo is a human being, or that life begins at conception. Some people do. So if we're talking about the protection, the dignity, the freedom of the person, the right to life, the freedom to life, you can see that that right will be differently applied depending on how you understand.
I just cannot for the life of me don't understand why people don't take precautions and use abortion as a form of contraception. It's ridiculous.
I think a lot of people use abortion as a form of contraception, as a last
That's
resort.
horrible.
But then there are people that, look, religious people have their scruples against contraception as well.
That's ridiculous. That's over the top.
Well, that's your opinion.
You will end up having child after child after child after child.
Yes, well...
Not everyone wants to have that many children, Thomas.
But what you've just said, and in the way that you've just said it, is an attack upon Catholics, who have a completely different view of contraception. And there are many issues bundled into that. And there are certain assumptions about small families, big families. And not just Catholics, but a lot of Christians would be involved in here. Not even to go beyond the confines of Christianity. But what I'm trying... This is a sidetrack. The essential point that I was trying to make is that when it comes to a minority, we start with the individual, but let's just keep in the back of our minds for a moment the most vulnerable, because to paraphrase Mahatma Gandhi, the way to evaluate how well a society is doing is to look at how it treats its weakest members. The disabled,
yes.
right? The crippled, the dying. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
We're not going down the euthanasia path today. Look at the morality of that or not, but well, I'm just saying there are a lot of vulnerable people in our society who have rights and who need to be protected. And maybe to Gandhi's statement, we might want to add, we can also tell a lot about a society through the way it treats animals and plants and its farming practices and how it cultivates its food, but especially how it treats its animals, how cruel
so shocking.
or kind towards
shocking.
animal life.
From what I've seen.
Okay, so there are big problems in there, and we need to follow up on some of these issues in another segment. But right now I just want to say that you could say that the freedoms are the individual's freedom to speak and act, and it gives them a sanction, this right to act in a social context. But minorities do not need to be limited to the individual. But we have to tread carefully and define what we mean. For example, let's take a couple, a marriage. Does that couple have rights in the context of a wider community? Does a family of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however large, have rights vis-a-vis their community, vis-a-vis their society? Do children have rights vis-a-vis other generations? Do women have rights? Do nations have rights?
Of course.
So your instinctive reaction is, yes, of course they do. That makes sense. But let's trace why, and let's see how that can be tricky at times too. Because let's say we need to respect the rights of the family unit from interference by the state, people coming in, officials of the government, agents of the bureaucracy, forcing them to educate their children in a particular way, even taking their children from them. Doesn't the family have rights? Don't the parents have rights over the children? Well, it presupposes that everybody's rights within the family unit are being respected and protected. And if they're not, it becomes complicated.
Depends on how toxic the family unit is, Tom. Sometimes children
need
to be removed.
That's why we have agencies like in our neck of the woods, the Department of Community Justice or whatever, that can come in and take children into custody if there's a fear for their safety.
That's right.
Does a marriage have rights? Well, yes, all going well and under normal circumstances, not to be interfered with. But what if one partner is abusing the other partner? Then if you are respecting the rights of that couple, you are, in a way, you might be enabling further abuse. Does a nation have rights? Sovereignty? Yes, that makes sense. But what if the nation isn't protecting the rights of its citizens? Then it gets complicated. And people can trump up cases that this country doesn't respect the rights of its citizens, even though if you ask the citizens themselves, they might be satisfied with their government. They might want the right to replace their own government. But it can often be used as a pretext to invade and interfere with another country, which wouldn't be done under normal circumstances because sovereignty would be respected, but for the fact that that country doesn't respect their own citizens' rights. So in the normal course of things, if each unit in society, going from the smallest of the individual being out to couples and family groupings and community groupings and state and national and global, if each grouping is working properly internally, then there is a principle called subsidiarity, which says you shouldn't interfere in the workings of that smaller unit. A bigger organisation shouldn't interfere without really good reason and being informed by the moral law, we might say. Unfortunately, these smaller units and groupings can break down at any time. law firms grow rich because marriages break down and couples fail in their conflict resolution with each other. So what could have been settled at this scale, the level of the couple, now becomes a more public task for conflict resolution in the legal sphere. Again, let's say an individual doesn't take care of their health. Now, each of us is responsible, or should be responsible, for our own health. We should do the best to look after ourselves, nourish ourselves well, get enough rest, care for things before they get out of hand. But if you've got an obesity epidemic or an opioid epidemic, if you've got people abusing themselves on a daily basis by what they eat, how they live, what they put into their bodies and so on, then it becomes a problem for the medical system, and it has to go up the chain and resolve at a higher level.
But that's usually for a reason.
It's for a reason because
they're sick in another area.
Not only are they sick, but they've lost their way and they can't regulate their health well enough on their own. They need to call in help from a higher level of organisation.
That's right.
I'm not saying higher being more moral or better. I'm just saying for a higher level of organised society. So, given all those qualifications, yes, rights are the freedom of action for a minority in a wider social context, so they won't be tyrannised over by a majority. And with duties, well, we're all beholden to one another because one person's right implies another person's duty. But there are also duties entailed in the exercise of our rights. For example, I have the right to free speech. I should be free to say whatever I want. But I also have the concomitant duty not to give false witness, not to lie and deceive people, not to defame or slander someone, because that impinges on other people's freedom. So it's not a carte blanche right to say whatever we need to say. So censorship is a nuanced issue. Just making a YouTube, which lots of people do. I mean, YouTube is owned by Google. And so whoever's a content creator is in effect collaborating with Google. And Google's got its own set of terms and conditions. Now let's just hope they're informed by the moral law. And let's hope the content creators are informed by the moral law. If I have a right to public assembly, to go make a protest in the street or join others and assemble for some cause, then it entails the duty not to violate other people or their property, etc., etc. So every right entails a duty, but then it often places a duty on the other person. As I said, if I have a right to life, you have a duty not to kill me. If I have a right to own, you have a duty not to steal from me, and vice versa. So to sum up, all freedoms are important. Religious freedom has a certain fundamentality because it not only acknowledges free will, but it acknowledges the source of that freedom in the Creator. Because the only alternative to that is to think that freedom is a permission that the powerful give to you. the people that run society. And that can lead to a lot of problems and a very miserable citizenry. Other thing is that freedom has two vectors: freedom from coercion and freedom to pursue the moral law and to pursue the truth, to seek truth in religion, to follow religion where it will take you in your sincere quest for the truth. The freedom from gives us our rights, and the freedom to gives us our duties, and they have to be viewed as interdependent and mutually referent. Now, when the expression of our religious freedom in the public square leads to chaos, mayhem, danger and threat, the civil power, of course, has the responsibility of moving in and ensuring that there is public order, which means safety for everybody, not only those involved in the conflict, but those on the periphery of it who may feel quite unsafe. But when such an intervention is made, it needs to be guided by the moral law, ideally. Well, yes. And a government that is operating correctly, any government, even a professed, thoroughgoing, secular government, needs to be in constant pursuit and quest, implicitly, of true religious values and the moral law. See you next time.